On our sick list. Not even going to attempt to go through them today. Uh, I think we all know who they are. I don't know of any ones that we need to add to it. Just need to keep all those folks in our thoughts and prayers. All those that are traveling, look around. You can see uh, we're a little light today, but I know of several families that are out of town this holiday weekend. So keep that in mind, Brother Clunch. Yeah, that's one we need to add. Faye Morrison's son had surgery, so outpatient. Add him to our list. Remember, Ladies' Day is coming up next Saturday. Huh? What did I say? Uh-oh. Ladies' breakfast. Excuse. I had the ladies' part right. Ladies' breakfast is coming up next Saturday, and eating time starts about 9 o'clock. You can be here early if you want to, and it's a good time for me to ask all the guys that are going to help to at least let me know, so I don't. Generally, the way it works is I make the announcement, and one or two talk to me, and then on the day it happens, they all show up. So I can't afford to lose many more hairs over it. So just let me know if you can make it. Okay, Ray Holland's going to have open heart surgery. We need to add him to our prayer list. Autumn Place is this afternoon at 4 o'clock. I believe that's all the announcements we need to make. Brother Luke, would you lead us in a prayer, please? I don't know what it is. You're going to see me put these on some today to read, but there's some days that I can get up and put my contacts in or my glasses on, and I can see a flea on a gnat, and then there's other days that I can't even see the gnat. So today is one of those days that it's just not focusing for me. So uh, Brother Terry got us down to about midways of chapter 30. Well, a little past that, but we're going back up to verse 31 and start there just so we can get a running start at it. We're at the point where Jacob has lived with Laban, served him for years now, and has kids of his own, wives, and he's about ready to leave, go back to his home territory. And there's an old country saying that we say that split the blankets, and that means sort of that they're not leaving on the best of terms here. So if you start with verse 31, it says what Laban is asking Jacob, says, "What shall I give thee?" And Jacob said, "Thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock." So he was asking to leave, and then Laban was wanting him to stay. And if you just recall what we've studied so far, why does Laban not want Jacob to leave? And in what way? Financially, he is being blessed by Jacob being there, because it seems like everything that Jacob touches enriches Laban. So, and he said, "Don't give me anything." He said, "I'm going to pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled, spotted cattle, all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So he's just telling him that this is what we'll do. We'll divide everything up. I'll take these, and you take the regular ones. Now, we're not going to try to get into all the names of all these, because we're going to later find out that there's one called a streaked and such, but we might mention it. But basically, in that part of the world, most of them are white. And here he's going to take out all the odd colored ones. The odd colored ones are more rare. They would be fewer in number, supposedly. But he's going to separate them that way so that at just a glance, somebody could tell if he had the wrong cattle in his area. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Every one that is not speckled, spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, Behold, I would it might be according to thy word. So he says, yeah, go ahead and do that, because Laban is again going to benefit by getting the larger amount, he thinks. 35, he said, remove that day the he goats that were ring-straked. Ring-straked just sort of means like it's a circle streak. It's not a circle, but it's not exactly a straight line. It's just sort of a curved streak. But again, if you want to look at it one way, it would be an imperfection. It wouldn't be the pure color. And every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and all gave them into the hand of his sons. And he set 3 days' journey betwixt him and Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flock. So Jacob is again taking over, running the show, taking care of the feeding and all of this. And they put them 3 days apart so they won't be mixing together, intermingling. Yes, sir. Right. It would be. So, if Laban just has the pure white, then that's every time he shears, he doesn't then have to sit down and separate. However, and with them being more rare, there are some people that liked the variety of colors mixed in with things. So there's some positives and some negatives. Then it says, Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and the chestnut, and peeled. You can tell Old English spelling here should be P-E-E-L. What we would use is peeling something, but here it's peeled white stripes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rods. So that'd basically be like taking a tree and stripping the bark off in streaks, and then letting the sapwood show through so you can see the color. And he set the rods which he had peeled before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods, and brought forth cattle ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Okay. Why did he bother to do that? Why did he bother to peel back some of the branches and put them in front of the cattle, Brother Golden? Mm-hmm. There was as Brother Golden was saying, the superstition. Superstition was that whatever the cattle saw that's what they would breed. It's very similar to how superstitions throughout history. Uh, we're not so much that today, but growing up in the country folks had a lot of superstitions. Some of you might be old enough to remember that pregnant women were supposed to avoid certain things because if they saw certain things happen, it would have an effect on the child that was to be born. Do you recall any of that, Glenda, or she's sort of nodding her head, yeah. But uh, and I've told you this before, but when I worked at the funeral home, a lot more people died at home back in those days than they do now. Most of them go to the hospital. But when you'd go to the home to pick up somebody that was deceased, you could walk in and there would be black cloth hanging over mirrors. Windows would be open a little bit, and it was all superstition because the people thought that if the mirrors were left open, the reflection, the person, the ghost would stay there. The windows were open so the person could, the spirit of the person could leave. We were even supposed to carry the people out feet first. Why would you go out feet first instead of head first? If you went out head first, the body is looking back into the house and the spirit stays and lingers. Like I say, that's just a lot of super. You're kind of grinning. You're familiar with that, aren't you? A little bit, yes. So superstitions have a lot to do with it. But here, as Brother Golden mentioned, there was two trains of thought on it, and I tend to go along with the second thought that God had something to do with it. That God had told him to give him this to do so he could increase his. God, the way he works sometimes is he gives you instructions on what to do, but then he's up there back in these days pulling the strings. So he's helping increase the flock. Verse 39, the flock conceived before the rods brought forth all those. Jacob separated them and set the faces to the flock toward the ring straight and all the brown and the flock of Laban, and he put his own flock by themselves and put them not under Laban's cattle. And it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not. So the feebler were Laban's and the stronger Jacob's. Again, this is just another way to work it out. And in this part of the world, sheep lambed twice a year. And they say that the autumn time frame was the stronger, the healthier, and the other was 6 months later was the weaker. So Jacob was just using all the tools at his command with the Lord's help to make sure that his flock increased, healthy, strong, and Laban's was not. Verse 40, when the cattle were feeble, he put them not. Verse 43, and the man increased exceedingly and had much cattle and maidservants and men servants and camel and asses. So during this next period of time, he's already worked 14 years for his two wives, and now he's been working, taking care of the flocks, and now his herds are getting to be massive. He has family. Any questions then or comments through chapter 30? Yes, Brother Clutch. Mm-hmm. Well, I believe that because if he had done nothing, would he have been earning any of it too? So, God puts us in the mix. We're supposed to do something in this mix. Anything else then on chapter 30? Chapter 31, and he heard, meaning Jacob heard the words of Laban's sons, and Jacob, excuse me, and he heard, which means Laban, heard the words of his sons, and saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. Did he take anything away from Jacob? Literally? Laban took from him? Okay. Hold on to that thought. We're gonna build on it here in a few minutes. And Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Why was Laban not as happy as he was before? He got the bad end of the deal. He wasn't as prosperous as he was before, because before, everything that Jacob did enriched Laban. Now that they're about to separate and go in their own ways, Jacob is, even though he is taking care of Laban's stuff, he's still getting the better end of the deal. Right. Brother Cox just said Laban really wasn't suffering. It was just that Jacob was getting more, and so his sons were not happy with that. And the Lord, verse 3, the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. And Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God suffered him not to hurt me. We are beginning to get a glimpse of just what kind of person Laban is. I used to be in one of those dreaded professions called car sales. And it seemed like every time that they had a great idea to change the method of which we got paid, that method was always to enrich them and either make us have to work harder for what we got or cut our wages. And I think the same thing applies here with Laban, that every time he changed the rules or changed the plans, he was helping himself without taking into consideration anyone else. And we can go all the way back to Jacob's first marriage with Leah. How did that work out? Why did that work out? It worked out to Laban's benefit because, hey, I got rid of the older daughter first like I'm supposed to. I tricked you, and now you've got to work another 7 years for me to get what you wanted. So, like I say, we're getting a little insight into Laban at this point. What goes around comes around. Jacob was initially the one to be the sneak and stole his brother's birthright, and now it's all going around. Verse 8, if he said thus, the speckle shall be thy wages, and all the cattle bear speckle. And if he said thus, the ringstrake shall be their hire, then bear all the cattle ringstrake. Thus God had taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. So right there, that one verse says that God had a hand in it, that it wasn't just on Jacob. Came to pass at that time that the cattle conceived, that I lifted up my eyes, saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ringstrake, speckled, and grizzled. Anybody know what the word grizzled would mean when it's talking about color of an animal? Your Bible says what? Spotted. That's basically, if you go back to the etymology of that word, it comes in to really be something like hail. So, something white dropped down and just spot up the animal. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob, and I said, here am I. And he said, lift up now thine eyes and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ringstrake, speckled, and grizzled. For I have seen all that Laban hath done unto thee. I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. And Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? You find that an odd comment? They've been married to this fellow now for how many years? Several. We'll just leave it at several. He's already told them they're about to depart and go someplace else. And they're wondering if there's any inheritance that's coming to them from Laban. Now, look at the very next verse, though. Are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us and has quite devoured also our money. Did Laban sell Leah and Rachel? Yeah. 7 years of Jacob's labor for each. You see, this is a little twist in culture timeline-wise. In this period of time, men paid the, dowry for the woman, because women were counted of value. Even they were counted as property, but they were counted as value, and men had to pay a dowry to get them. So here, in essence, I guess you could say they were sold, because Laban received something for them. Then if we come up through the Middle Ages, come on up, why all of a sudden was it that when men married women, the women had to pay, or the parents of the woman had to pay to the man a dowry? Not going to touch that one? Well, how about let's just use facts. When we're at the time period we're looking in at, what did the women do? Well, they bore children, but before they were married off and bore children, did they sit in the house? They worked. When we get up to the time period I'm talking about, where the women paid, the parents of the women paid dowry, the women, for the most part, were unschooled. They sat in the house. They didn't have anything to do. The maids and all took care of them. So here, Laban is getting money for a valuable commodity, a daughter, Whereas when we get to England and the women the parents of the women are paying the dowry, they're getting rid of something so somebody else can take care of them. That's kind of cold-blooded and harsh, but that's reality. But here it was a commodity. But then the second part says, after he sold us, he devoured our money. So that means that Laban took everything that he had earned, and I guess you could say just squandered it or got rid of, or just lived the way he wanted to, not thinking about anything else. Because verse 16 says, for all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's, now then whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. So his wives are saying, they realize what kind of person Laban is, that he's not the greatest character. And they're saying, whatever you say, do. So they're ready to go with him. Starting verse 17, then Jacob rose up, set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. So remember, they're about 3 days apart at this juncture, and they're getting ready to go. And when Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. So Rachel at least had time to go back to her father's house and steal the images that were her father's. Why do you think she took those images? And what were those images? Okay. The ESV version of the Bible says that there were household gods, idols. The RV says that they were teraphim, which could be idols or images. We will later find out in verse 30, if you go down to verse 30, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So it would be the images that represent gods, which, if you look at it then, Laban was a pagan worshiper, worshipped idols, right? Now, if you go into some literature, and I'm just going to mention this just for thought purposes, some literature has it that, and this is ancient literature, not modern stuff, but in some of the ancient literature, it says that Laban had a skull. Somebody had been beheaded, and they had preserved it with the salt and the things that, like they do to mummify and such, and wrote on tablets and put the tablets under the tongue, and so the skull was sitting there, and it was sort of a divination type thing where he could go to that and sort of see future events, and that Rachel took that so that they wouldn't know that they had that Laban wouldn't know that they had left. Personally, I put that way out here on the speculation branch. I think if you go back to verse 15 where it says we're counted strangers, and he got rid of all the money from us, there wasn't anything there, so she just decided that he was such a character that she was going to take something of his. At least that's the way I put it, but it also just builds in that, like I say, he was a worshipped idols, worshipped pagans. Anything through verse 19 then? Yes, sir, Brother Golden. Yeah, that was another one, that she stole them so he couldn't. She was going to try to get back at him some which way. Yeah. So we really don't know. We just know that she took it. Yes. Which I am so glad you said that, but Brother Clint's just said that they could have been made of a fine metal or something, and she was going to get something of value, but also the possibility that she hadn't completely given up that worship either. Why, which brings up this question, why was Jacob sent back there to get a wife and not marry somebody in the land of Canaan? Why was he instructed not to marry somebody in Canaan? And that's because they were idol worshipers. They were not worshiping the true God. Well, he goes back to get a wife whose father is a worshiper of idols. Yes, sir. Yeah. That was the main reason he got Abraham out, because what did Terah, Abraham's father, what was he? He was an idol worshiper, right? Sadly, a commonplace thing. One second, let Brother Jeremy finish. Yes, sir. Overall, he just wasn't a very good person. So, Brother Golden. Yes, sir. Okay. Yes, sir. If he sent him back to get the lesser of two evils, what was the big evil? Okay. Ooh, he brought up that politic word. He said, regrettably, we do the same thing today. We have to pick the lesser of two evils, and he mentioned politics. Well, I made a comment to Andrea the other day, since you brought the subject up. I said, years ago, I didn't tell her this part, but years ago, a fellow that was preaching here that is now deceased, and made the comment to me that the problem with politics today is there are no statesmen, only politicians. Which, if you think about it, is a real accurate picture. But the comment that I had made to Andrea was that politicians today are nothing but carpetbaggers. If you look at the definition of a carpetbagger, what is a carpetbagger? Unscrupulous opportunist. I don't care what stripe you wear in politics. Left, right, in the middle, over the top. That definition fits them all, in my opinion. But we're going to get off politics and back to the Bible before we get way off field. Verse 20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. When we get to verse 21, it says, so he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the mount of Gilead. What does the phrase passed over the river mean? Now, we have to remember, I'll give you a hint. Where had he gone back to, and where had Abraham come from originally? So crossing over the river would have been which river? The main river Euphrates. That's absolutely correct, because he'd gone up to Haran and up to those folks. So he's crossed back over the Euphrates and headed back south again. And it was told Laban on the third day that Jacob was fled. And he took his brethren with him and pursued him for 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount of Gilead. With a 3-day head start, it took him 7 days to catch him. But you have to remember, you would think it would take longer. However, you have to remember that when he fled, what did he leave with? Everything. Even his cattle. And if you've ever been around cattle much, you can't move very fast because there's going to be some young sprinkled in there among them. So you have to take it slow to make sure all the cattle survive. So they can't move as fast as somebody that's not burdened with the cattle giving chase. Brother Golden? Oh, yes. Yeah. Now, his 3 days, they were 3 days apart to start with, and that 3 days may have been already headed the direction he was going to be going. And then, see, they were much more adept at doing things than we are today. Today, if we had to, when I was a teenager, it was not uncommon for us to walk 4 or 5 miles to go do something. Today, if I had to walk 4 or 5 miles to go to the grocery store, I'd have to stop 15 or 20 times along the way to rest. So, but they were just conditioned to do that, and that was their mode of travel. Yes, sir. I walked 5 miles each way to school uphill. But he caught up with him, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Well, actually what that means is you don't start out. It was a custom of theirs when they met somebody to sort of talk nice about them and then lower the hammer or drop the boom, whatever you want to say it. You know, it'd be like me going up to Brother Clance, and if I had something against him, oh, Brother Clance, so glad to see you, and then put the knife in the back. So he's telling him not to do that. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. Laban said unto Jacob, what hast thou done that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives, taken with the sword? Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me, and didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with song and with timbrel and with harp? And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. Well, hadn't his daughters just previously said that he had sold them? So how can he come back now and say, you stole them? Because they had already been his. I'm sorry? Laban's version. There you go. So let's read a little bit. Verse 29, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt, but the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. And now, though thou wouldst needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So now he is accusing Jacob of not only stealing away in the night with his daughters, and he also says sons, but what does he really mean? Grandsons. Took his family, and now you've taken my idols too. Yes, sir. All on perceptions there. And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, verse 31, and Jacob answered and said unto Laban, because I was afraid, for I said, peradventure thou wouldst take by force thy daughters from me. I think that sort of puts it all in the right shoebox. Who did Leah and Rachel belong to? Jacob. They were married to Jacob. Who did all the cattle that Jacob had with him belong to? Jacob. He had worked for him. So everything that he had with him belonged to Jacob. Laban, on the other hand, is saying that you left without letting me give you a proper going away. Would he have given him a proper going away? Pardon? Might have buried him. Okay. Odds are not that he would have taken his stuff like Jacob just said that he was afraid he would do, that he would take all his stuff back. With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. See, at this point, Jacob didn't know that Rachel was the one that had, well, first off, he didn't know that anything was missing. So now he's saying, let whoever you find it with be put to death, which gives you a slight indication of the way they looked at things back in those days. Apparently, thievery had a death penalty with it. Because he said, let him be put to death. With whosoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren, discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. So he's not only saying that your gods, but whatever else you find here that belongs to you, you take it. I don't want it. Laban went into Jacob's tent and to Leah's tent and to the two maidservants' tents, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. What is camel's furniture? Saddle. And in those camel saddles, they had compartments. They were not made like Western saddles that we're familiar with on horses or English riding saddles. They had compartments in them that you could put things. In the West, when I was riding in the mountains of Colorado, we put the saddle on it, and then we had saddlebags to carry our stuff with on the back. Here it was all built into one thing that they just put on the camel at one time. And she was sitting on that and said to her father, let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. And he searched, but found not the images. Do you find it maybe just a little ironic that he trusted Rachel to the point where she was telling him the truth? Because he didn't search father? Time's up. Brother Clunts can start here Wednesday night. Thank y'all for your comments and attention.